was just after 8:30 on a quiet Tuesday morning. Parents were dropping off their children at school. Neighbors were walking dogs. People were leaving for work. Then, a man stepped into a suburban Minnesota neighborhood carrying a gun. He pointed it at a neighbor. Seconds later, he walked into a house. The shouting began. Then the gunshots. When police finally entered the home hours later, they found 2 bodies lying inside. One belonged to the gunman. The other belonged to a woman whose entire life had been dedicated to helping people heal. A psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, a respected business owner, a mother of 4, a Kenyan immigrant who had spent years building what many would call the American dream. Her name was Hulda Bochere Mosiori. But behind the successful career, behind the beautiful family photos, behind the smiling face, a dangerous story had been unfolding for months, and by the time anyone realized just how serious it was already too late.
Twisted tales in every folder. Truth runs hot while the trail gets colder. Crime dopers, we don't look away.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Crime Dopers. I'm your host, Wanja. If you're new here, this is where crime meets truth. Every week we take a deep dive into true crime cases from Kenya and around the world, not simply to tell you what happened, but to understand why it happened and what we can all learn from it. Today's story is especially heartbreaking because it reminds us that success doesn't always guarantee safety. Living abroad doesn't erase abuse, and sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. No, it comes from someone who once claimed to love you. This is a story of Hulda Bochere Mosiori, a woman who dedicated her life to caring for other people's mental health, yet became the victim of a tragedy that has forced many difficult conversations about intimate partner violence, control, and the warning signs that are often dismissed until it's too late. So, settle in and let's get into today's case. Whenever we cover cases involving homicide, it's easy for the victim's identity to become overshadowed by the crime itself. Their final moments become their entire story. But before Hulda became a headline, she was simply a woman trying to build a better future. Originally from Kenya, Hulda had worked incredibly hard to establish herself in the United States. Anyone who has ever moved to another country understands that starting over isn't easy. You're leaving behind family, friends, your support system, sometimes even your professional identity. You have to prove yourself all over again. For many immigrants, every milestone comes through sacrifice, long shifts, extra courses, financial struggles, homesickness, years of uncertainty. Hulda understood that journey all too well, and despite those challenges, she persevered. Eventually, she became a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, a profession that requires years of education, licensing, and clinical experience. That title isn't handed to anyone, it's earned. Every patient she treated represented countless hours spent studying, long nights, clinical placements, examinations, professional development, and according to people who knew her, she loved what she did. She wasn't simply prescribing medication, she listened, she comforted, she helped people navigate anxiety, depression, trauma, and some of the darkest moments of their lives. There's something deeply ironic about that. Someone who spent every day helping others survive emotional pain will eventually lose her own life to someone else's inability to manage his. As her career flourished, Hulda reached another milestone. She established her own independent mental health practice in Maple Grove, Minnesota. That is no small achievement. Opening a healthcare practice requires vision, financial discipline, business planning, professional credibility. Patients trusted her enough to seek her out. Colleagues respected her enough to recommend her. She wasn't merely surviving in America anymore. She was thriving, Friends describe her as generous, kind, calm, the type of person who celebrated other people's success instead of competing with them, the kind of friend who answered phone calls no matter how busy she was, someone who gave more than she received, but perhaps the role she cherished most was being a mother. Hulda had 4 children. Everything she worked for, every shift she accepted, every business decision she made ultimately came back to them. Like so many parents in the diaspora, she carried enormous responsibility, providing financially, building stability, creating opportunities that perhaps she herself never had. When friends speak about her today, they rarely begin by mentioning her profession. They begin by talking about her children because that's who she was, a mother first. Everything else came second, and from the outside, life appeared to be falling perfectly into place. She had a respected career, a growing business, a home, a family, the kind of future many people dream about. But appearances can be incredibly deceptive, because while Hulda was building a new life, someone else was becoming increasingly unable to accept that he no longer had control over it.
Statement, someone outside with a gun.
He did have a black handgun in his waistband. He did show it to the victim.
I can confirm inside waistband carry. There was a handgun.
There's been no movement in there. We'll take care of that with the drone.
Now here's where the story begins to take a turn. Authorities later identified the shooter as 51-year-old Mel Melchizedek. Not a stranger, not a random intruder, a former partner. That single word, former, matters, because according to community accounts and information that emerged after the tragedy, Hulda had already ended their relationship months before the shooting. Think about that for a second. This wasn't a couple arguing over a relationship. The relationship was already over, at least in Hulda's mind. She had made her decision. She had chosen to move forward. Unfortunately, Mel had not. And this is something experts on intimate partner violence warn about repeatedly. Living an abusive or controlling relationship is often the most dangerous period. Why? Because for someone driven by entitlement and control, a breakup simply isn't rejection. It's perceived as losing ownership, losing influence, losing power. Now ask yourself this. If one person accepts that a relationship has ended, but the other refuses to believe it's over, has the relationship truly ended? Legally, yes. Emotionally, not necessarily. And that's where danger often begins. Community members later suggested that Mel struggled deeply with Hulda's growing independence. She wasn't financially dependent on him. She owned her own home. She had established her own practice. She was creating a future that no longer revolved around him. Instead of celebrating her success, reports suggest that he became increasingly resentful of it. Control has many faces. Sometimes it looks like jealousy. Sometimes constant phone calls. Sometimes demands to know where someone is. Sometimes emotional manipulation. And sometimes it escalates into something far more dangerous. What makes this case particularly heartbreaking is that Hulda didn't completely disappear from Mel's life. No, they still had reasons to communicate. They shared parenting responsibilities. Like many separated couples, conversations continued because children still need both parents involved. But according to community accounts, those interactions increasingly became opportunities for conflict rather than cooperation. Ordinary discussions reportedly turned into heated confrontations. The focus shifted away from parenting and back toward the relationship Hulda had already left behind. Sadly, that pattern is one investigators and domestic violence advocates have seen far too many times. A relationship ends, one person begins rebuilding, the other becomes consumed by the belief that if they can't have that person, no one will, and that belief can become deadly. At this point, though, no one in the neighborhood knew that an ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become the day Hulda's life and the lives of her children would change forever. Because on April 22nd, 2025, Mel Melchizedek made one final decision, and within minutes, everything Hulda had spent years trying to build would come crashing down.
It's mind-blowing, especially out here in the suburbs, is you don't expect to see or hear anything like that going on in your neighborhood.
By the morning of Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025, Hulda probably expected it to be an ordinary day, another work day, another opportunity to care for patients, another chance to provide for her children. No one wakes up expecting it to be the last morning of their life. And yet, at approximately 8:30 a.m., that ordinary morning took a devastating turn. According to investigators, Mel Melchizedek arrived at Hulda's home on Snowy Old Street Northwest in Ramsey, Minnesota. But before he even entered the house, something happened that immediately alarmed the neighborhood. He confronted one of Hulda's neighbors, not with words alone, but with a firearm. Imagine that for a moment. You're outside your home on what feels like another weekday morning, then suddenly a man approaches you carrying a gun. You don't know what's about to happen. You don't know whether he's going to pull the trigger. You don't know if you're about to become part of someone else's tragedy. The neighbor survived.
I witnessed everything through my garage camera.
Will Foster lives on Snowy Owl Street Northwest, not far from the home that's now the scene of a double death investigation.
I got these videos of officers with AR-15s walking through my yard and SWAT members with dogs and all that stuff. They were driving on the lawn.
But that brief encounter became the first unmistakable sign that something was terribly wrong. Authorities later indicated that after confronting the neighbor, Mel forced his way toward Hulda's residence. Within moments, the neighborhood changed. People who had been preparing for work suddenly found themselves listening, watching, trying to understand what was unfolding next door. Then came the shouting. Witnesses later reported hearing raised voices coming from inside the house. No one knows every word that was exchanged. Those final conversations died with the only two people who heard them. But investigators believe those moments represented the final confrontation between two people whose relationship had already ended months before. One had moved on, the other apparently hadn't.
It's really sad. I don't know what to... It's kind of a little hard because I have not gone through situations like this. We have little kids, right? We are like concerned, like the environment we live in. So that was a little different for us.
Now ask yourself something. If someone arrives carrying a firearm, was there ever going to be a peaceful conversation? Or had the decision already been made long before he walked through that front door? Those are the questions investigators can never fully answer, because intent exists inside a person's mind. And when that person dies at the scene, some answers disappear forever. Then the shouting stopped and the gunshots began. Several neighbors later described hearing multiple shots ring out in quick succession, not minutes apart, not spread throughout the morning, one after another. Fast, violent, terrifying. For everyone outside the home, time seemed to freeze. Within minutes, emergency calls flooded dispatch. What began as a person with a gun report suddenly evolved into something much larger. Police officers rushed toward the neighborhood. Dispatchers worked rapidly to gather information. No one yet knew whether there were hostages inside, whether anyone was still alive, or whether the gunman intended to come back outside. Because officers had reason to believe an armed suspect remained inside the residence, the response changed immediately. This was no longer a routine police call. It became an active, tactical incident. Soon, squad cars filled the quiet residential street. Additional deputies arrived. SWAT officers responded. Negotiators were called in. The Minnesota State Patrol also assisted as authorities established a security perimeter around the area. Residents nearby received shelter-in-place alerts. Parents kept children indoors. Curtains closed, front doors locked. Imagine being one of those neighbors, looking through your window, seeing armored vehicles, officers carrying tactical equipment, knowing that somewhere inside a nearby house, someone could still be armed. Police attempted to establish communication if anyone inside was alive. They wanted to save them. Negotiators reportedly spent valuable time trying to make contact, calling into the residence, waiting, listening, hoping, but no one answered. Minutes turned into hours. Every minute that passed made the silence heavier. Investigators had to weigh in every possible scenario. Was the suspect preparing an ambush? Was someone injured and unable to respond? Was there still an opportunity to rescue Hulda? Those questions shaped every tactical decision that morning. Eventually, the silence itself became the answer. Officers made the difficult decision to enter the home. It's one of the most dangerous moments in any police operation. They had no way of knowing what waited behind that front door. Every room had to be treated as a potential threat. Every corner had to be cleared carefully. The priority was simple: protect life, neutralize danger, find anyone who might still need help. But what officers found instead was heartbreak.
It's really sad. I don't know what to. It's kind of a little hard because I have not gone through situations like this. We have little kids, right? We are like concerned, like the environment we live in. So that was a little different for us.
When law enforcement entered the residence, they discovered two people dead: Hulda Bochere Mosiori and Mel Melchizedek. Investigators later concluded that Mel had fatally shot Hulda before using the same firearm to take his own life. The medical examiner ruled Hulda's death a homicide and Mel's death a suicide. Just like that, the criminal investigation changed. There will be no arrests, no interrogation, no courtroom testimony, no trial, no opportunity for Hulda's family to hear him explain why. There will be no guilty plea, no conviction, no sentencing. Legally, the case became one of forensic reconstruction rather than criminal prosecution. Investigators will spend days processing evidence, examining ballistic evidence, documenting the crime scene, interviewing neighbors, reviewing phone records and witness statements, not to build a case for court, no, but to establish as accurately as possible exactly what had happened inside that home. For Hulda's loved ones, those answers mattered, but they will never erase the reality waiting outside that home. 4 children had just lost their mother. A community had lost a respected healthcare provider. Patients had lost someone they trusted with their mental well-being. Friends had lost someone they described as compassionate, dependable, and generous. And an entire neighborhood will forever remember the morning their peaceful street became the scene of a murder-suicide. One of the most painful realities about this case is that Hulda seemed to be doing everything right. She had built a successful career, she owned a home, she was raising her children, she had reportedly ended a relationship that was no longer healthy. From the outside, those are the steps people often encourage survivors to take: leave, become independent, build a new life. But domestic violence experts repeatedly warn that the period immediately after separation can be the most dangerous. Not because the survivor has done something wrong, no, but because the abusive or controlling partner may see the loss of control as something they cannot accept. That's one of the hardest truths in this story. Hulda wasn't killed because she failed. She was killed while trying to move forward. And perhaps that's the lesson we should all sit with for a moment. Because sometimes living is not the end of the danger. Sometimes it's the point at which the danger reaches its highest level. For investigators, the work didn't end when the shooting stopped. Every homicide investigation follows a process. Evidence must be documented, witnesses interviewed, ballistics examined, autopsy findings reviewed, phone records analyzed. Every piece helps investigators answer one question: what happened? But in Hulda's case, there was another question that will never be answered. Why? Not completely, because the only person who could fully explain his motives never stood before detectives. After the medical examiner completed the examinations, Hulda Bochere Mosiori's death was officially ruled a homicide. Mel Melchizedek's death was ruled a suicide. With the suspect deceased, there will be no criminal prosecution. Instead, the investigation moved toward forensic completion and administrative closure. No arrest, no preliminary hearing, no jury, no guilty verdict, no sentencing. For many families, a courtroom can become part of the healing process, not because it erases grief, but because it creates accountability, an opportunity to hear evidence presented publicly, to confront the person responsible, to watch justice take its course. Hulda's family was denied even that. Instead, justice ended when the gunshot ended. And sometimes, that's one of the cruelest realities of murder-suicide. The person responsible escapes every earthly consequence, while everyone else is left carrying the weight of what happened. Cases like this often leave behind questions that can never be answered. What was said during those final moments inside that house? Did Hulda realize how much danger she was in? Would anything have changed what happened that morning? Will the protection order have helped? Could someone have intervened sooner? Will different warning systems have made a difference? Those questions are understandable, but they also have a way of trapping families into endless cycles of what if. The reality is, hindsight gives us information that people living through a situation simply don't have. It's easy to connect the dots after tragedy. It's much harder when those dots are scattered across weeks or months and don't yet form a clear picture. That doesn't mean we stop asking questions. It means we ask better ones. Instead of asking, why didn't she leave? Maybe we should ask, what made it difficult to leave safely? Instead of asking, why didn't anyone stop him? Maybe we should ask, what systems can we strengthen so survivors receive protection before violence escalates? And perhaps the most important question of all, how do we become the kind of community where people feel safe enough to ask for help? Long after news crews parked away their cameras, life continued. Patients still needed mental health care. Children still woke up each morning missing their mother. Friends still reached for their phones before remembering she would never answer again. But something else continued too, her impact. When colleagues remembered Hulda, they didn't begin by talking about the way she died. They talked about the way she lived. A woman who cared deeply about her patients. A professional who worked tirelessly to build her own practice. A mother whose greatest pride was her children. A friend who showed up when people needed her most. Sometimes we measure success by titles, degrees, businesses, income. But perhaps a better measure is this: who will tell your story when you're gone? Judging by the countless tributes shared after Hulda's death, she spent her life making other people's lives better. And maybe that's the legacy worth remembering. Not the violence that ended her life, but the compassion that defined it. Following Hulda's death, members of the Kenyan community in Minnesota came together in mourning. Prayer services were held. Memorial gatherings filled with family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors honored her life. Community fundraising efforts were organized to help support her children and provide stability during an unimaginable time. Advocates also use the tragedy to encourage more open conversations about intimate partner violence because silence can be dangerous. Many survivors stay quiet because they fear they won't be believed. Others worry about being judged. Some don't want to burden family members. Others hope things will simply get better. And within some communities, there can be additional pressures. The fear of disappointing relatives, the expectation to keep family matters private, the concern that speaking out will bring shame. Those pressures are real, but so is the danger of isolation. One conversation, one trusted friend, one counselor, one faith leader, one support organization. Sometimes that's all it takes to begin changing the outcome. As I prepared this episode, one detail stayed with me more than any other. Hulda spent her career helping people navigate emotional pain. Every day she reminded others that healing was possible, that tomorrow will be better than today, that no one should have to suffer alone. I wish someone had been able to protect her with the same care she offered everyone else, because no matter how successful someone appears, no matter how educated, no matter how accomplished, no one should have to fear the person they once loved, and no child should have to grow up without a parent because someone chose violence over acceptance. If today's story has taught us anything, it's that love never demands control. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't punish someone for leaving. And love certainly doesn't end in violence. Thank you for spending this time with me. Cases like Hulda's aren't so easy to tell, and I know they aren't always easy to hear, but stories like hers deserve to be remembered, not because we want to relieve tragedy, but because remembering can help prevent silence. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone you care about. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. If you or someone you know is experiencing intimidation, stalking, threats, or any form of intimate partner violence, don't wait for things to get worse. Reach out to trusted friends, family members, local advocacy organizations, or emergency services. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It can become a life-saving decision. And if you're watching from the Kenyan diaspora, check in on your people, not just when they post happy photos, not just on birthdays. Check on the quiet ones, the ones who suddenly disappear, the ones who keep saying, "I'm okay." Sometimes those two words hide an entire storm. Before we go, here's today's Crime Doper's life rule. When someone shows you that they cannot respect your boundaries, believe them. Your safety is more important than someone else's comfort with your decisions. Justice isn't only about solving crimes. Sometimes justice begins with refusing to stay silent. I'm Wanja. This has been Crime Dopers, where crime meets truth. Stay aware, stay safe, stay alert, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Crime Dopers. We don't look away.